The plate shattered before it ever touched the counter. White ceramic exploded across the black and white checkered floor, toast skidding beneath a booth, butter smearing like a pale wound. The sound cut through the diner louder than the clatter of forks or the hiss of the grill. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head turned. Behind the counter stood a young black woman, no older than 22, frozen in place. Her hands trembled, palms still open as if the plate might magically return. Her apron, clean just minutes ago, was now streaked with coffee and grease. Her eyes darted from the broken plate to the man towering over her. The man's name tag read Rick Manager. Rick's face twisted with disgust. "You can't even serve toast without messing it up," he barked loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Is that too complicated for you?" The girl swallowed hard. I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it right away. I'll pay for it from my tips." Rick laughed, not a chuckle. A sharp, humiliating laugh. "From your tips?" He leaned closer, voice dripping with mockery. "Sweetheart, you don't make enough tips to pay for air in this place." A few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A middle-aged man lowered his coffee cup but said nothing. A woman near the window glanced up, then quickly looked away. Silence, thick and complicit, settled over the room. The girl knelt slowly, her knees pressing into the cold tile as she reached for the broken pieces. Her fingers shook so badly she cut herself on a shard. A thin line of red appeared. Rick noticed. Instead of concern, his lips curled. "Careful," he sneered. "Blood on the floor comes out of my paycheck, and trust me, you already owe me enough." Her cheeks burned. She kept her head down. "I said look at me when I'm talking to you," Rick snapped. She hesitated, then lifted her eyes. They were dark, wide, and wet, holding back tears she refused to let fall. Rick scoffed. "You know what your problem is," he said, pacing behind the counter like a judge delivering a sentence. "People like you always think you deserve more patience, more chances, more respect." He leaned in, lowering his voice just enough to make it cut deeper. "But this is all you're ever going to be, a nobody, dropping plates in a diner you don't belong in." A sharp inhale rippled through the room. Still, no one spoke. At the far end of the counter sat a man who hadn't touched his food. He was dressed simply, dark jacket, worn boots, baseball cap pulled low. In front of him sat a plain white plate with 2 slices of toast, uneaten, growing cold. He de-ordered it 5 minutes earlier. He was supposed to be invisible, that was the plan, but his jaw tightened. Rick slammed his palm on the counter. "Clean it up, and when you're done, go wash your hands. I don't want that touching customers' food." The word that hung in the air like poison. The girl flinched. As she bent to pick up the last piece of ceramic, a whisper slipped out, so soft it wasn't meant for anyone else to hear. "I didn't mean to drop it," she murmured. "My mom didn't sleep last night. She's sick again." Her voice cracked. "I just need this job just a little longer." The man at the counter froze. Something about that whisper, about the quiet dignity wrapped in desperation, hit him like a punch to the chest. Rick heard it too. "Oh, here we go," he said loudly. "The sob story." He turned to the customers, spreading his arms. "You hear that? There's always an excuse, always a sick relative, always a reason why it's not their fault." He pointed down at her. "You want sympathy? Earn it, or better yet, find another place to cry." The girl's shoulders shook now. Tears fell, splashing onto the tile beside the broken plate. Still, no one moved, no one except the man with the toast. He slowly set his coffee cup down. Rick noticed him at last. "What are you staring at?" He snapped, "Eat your food or mind your business." The man didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed on the girl, then he stood. The stool scraped against the floor, loud in the silence. Heads turned again. Rick frowned. "Sir, unless you're planning to tip extra for the mess, I suggest you sit back down." The man took one step forward. That's when the girl looked up again, this time not at Rick, but at the stranger. Their eyes met, and for a split second, something unreadable passed between them. Hope. Recognition, fear. Before anyone could say another word, the girl whispered again, barely louder than breath. But this time, she wasn't speaking to herself. She was speaking to him. "Please," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Don't say anything. I can't afford to lose this job." The man's face went pale. Rick scoffed. "Oh, now she's recruiting customers." He shook his head. "Unbelievable." The man clenched his fists. He looked around the diner at the bowed heads, the silent witnesses, the girl still kneeling in broken glass. Then he looked back at Rick, and something in his eyes changed. But before he could speak, before anyone could stop what was coming, Rick said one last thing. "You should be grateful you even have a place here," he spat. "Because without people like me giving you work, you'd be nothing." The man's breath caught, because Rick was wrong, dead wrong. And the truth, the real truth about who that kneeling girl was and who he was about to turn this quiet diner upside down. But Rick didn't know that yet. He didn't know that the stranger standing a few feet away wasn't just a customer. He didn't know that this man had the power to end his career with a single sentence. And he definitely didn't know that the whisper behind the counter had just awakened a past he'd spent years trying to forget. Because a secret tied them together. A secret that would change everything. But to understand how it all led to this moment, we need to go back to how this story truly began, early this morning. The morning began long before the sun rose. In a narrow apartment squeezed between a closed laundromat and a boarded-up grocery store, Aaliyah Thompson sat on the edge of her bed, tying the frayed laces of her only pair of work shoes. One sole was peeling slightly at the toe, and she pressed it down with her thumb the way she did every day, as if sheer will might make it hold. The room was quiet, too quiet. No television, no alarm clock, just the faint hum of traffic from the street below and the slow, uneven breathing coming from the bed behind her. Her mother coughed. Aaliyah froze, her hand still on her shoe. "Mom," she whispered, standing quickly and crossing the room. Her mother, Lena Thompson, lay propped against thin pillows, her face pale, lips dry. The night had been hard again. The cough had come in waves, stealing her breath, bending her thin body forward until Aaliyah had feared, once more, that this might be the night she wouldn't recover. "I'm okay," Lena said weakly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're going to be late." Aaliyah brushed a hand over her mother's forehead. Warm, too warm. "You're burning up," she said, panic tightening her chest. "You should have woken me. And have you missed work?" Lena shook her head slowly. "Baby, you can't afford that." Aaliyah looked away, jaw clenched. She couldn't afford anything. The rent notice still sat folded on the small kitchen table, red letters screaming final warning. The pharmacy had refused to refill her mother's prescription last week without payment, and the electric company had already left a message, reminding her that kindness only lasted so long. Aaliyah worked 6 days a week at Harper's Diner, double shifts when she could get them, smiles she didn't feel, apologies she didn't owe, and still it was never enough. "I'll pick up soup after work," Aaliyah said softly, "and I'll talk to Mrs. Green downstairs. She said she might know a free clinic." Lena reached for her daughter's hand, fingers thin but firm. "Aaliyah, if it gets too hard—" "It's not," Aaliyah interrupted quickly, forcing brightness into her voice. "We're okay. I've got this." She leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. As she pulled back, Lena studied her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way worry had carved lines far too deep for someone so young. "You're too good for this world," Lena murmured. "Don't ever let it make you small." Aaliyah swallowed. "I won't," she promised. But as she grabbed her jacket and stepped into the hallway, fear followed her like a shadow. Outside, the city was still half asleep. Streetlights flickered. A bus roared past, spraying water from last night's rain onto the curb. Aaliyah pulled her jacket tighter and walked fast, counting steps the way she always did, 1, 2, 3, because numbers felt safer than thoughts. She passed the old playground where she used to bring her little brother before he moved to live with their aunt, past the corner store that no longer let her buy groceries on credit. Every step carried the same silent prayer: "Please, just let today be easy." Harper's Diner came into view, a glowing island of light in the gray morning. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted into the street. For a moment, Aaliyah paused. She straightened her shoulders. This place was humiliating sometimes, painful often. But it was also the only thing standing between her and homelessness, between her mother and a hospital bed she couldn't pay for. She pushed the door open. The bell above it jingled. "Morning," called out Denise, the older waitress who worked the early shift. Her voice carried warmth Aaliyah clung to like a lifeline. "You look tired, honey." Aaliyah forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep." Denise sighed knowingly. "Rick's already in a mood, careful." That single sentence tightened Aaliyah's stomach. Rick, the manager, he didn't like her, never had. From the first week she started, he'd watched her with narrowed eyes, correcting her more harshly than others, docking her tips for mistakes he ignored in everyone else. She suspected she knew why. She tied her apron and got to work. At first, things went smoothly. She refilled coffee cups, took orders, wiped counters. She moved fast, careful, invisible, until Rick appeared beside her, arms crossed. "Table 4's waiting," he snapped. "What, you need an engraved invitation? I was just—" "No excuses," he cut in. "Just do your job." "Yes, sir," she said quietly. The breakfast rush hit harder than usual. Orders stacked up, plates clattered, the grill sizzled. Aaliyah carried 2 plates at once, eggs and toast, balancing them the way she'd been taught. Her hands ached, her head throbbed. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. She stepped toward the counter. Someone bumped her from behind. The plate slipped. It all happened too fast. The crash. The silence, Rick's voice rising above everything else. and suddenly she was kneeling on the floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and judgment. As Rick's words cut into her, Aaliyah's mind wasn't on the customers watching. It was on her mother, on the pill bottle with 3 tablets left, on the rent notice, on the terrifying thought that if Rick fired her, if she lost this job, there would be nothing left to hold her life together. That was when the whisper escaped her lips. The one about her mom, the one she didn't mean anyone to hear. She didn't know yet that someone had heard. Someone who recognized that kind of fear. Someone whose own past had begun in a place just like this. Because the man sitting at the counter that morning hadn't come for breakfast. He'd come back to a memory, and fate had decided to place Aaliyah directly in his path. The diner felt smaller now. The walls, once decorated with cheerful posters and faded photographs of smiling customers, seemed to close in around Aaliyah as she remained kneeling on the cold tile floor. The smell of burnt toast mixed with fresh coffee, turning her stomach. Every sound felt louder, the scrape of a chair, the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversations trying and failing to pretend nothing was happening. Rick folded his arms and looked down at her as if she were something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Well," he snapped, "I don't have all day." "I'm cleaning it," Aaliyah said softly, reaching for another shard of ceramic. Her fingers stung where she'd cut herself, but she didn't dare slow down. Rick shook his head. "Unbelievable. Do you know how much waste costs this place every year? People like you, careless, distracted, you don't understand responsibility." Aaliyah's throat tightened. "I said I'd pay for it," she whispered. Rick laughed again. "With what money?" He turned toward the customers, raising his voice. "You see this? This is why businesses fail. You give someone a job out of charity and they think the rules don't apply." Aaliyah felt heat flood her face. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Crying only made things worse. Crying gave people permission to be cruel. A man at a nearby booth shifted in his seat. He looked at Aaliyah, then at Rick, discomfort flashing across his face, but he looked away. A woman whispered something to her husband. The husband shrugged. No one stood up. No one said her name. Rick crouched down suddenly, invading Aaliyah's space. His voice dropped to a sharp whisper meant only for her, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You should be grateful," he said. "Girls like you don't get many chances. Mess this one up and you're done." Aaliyah's hand stilled. "Please," she said, barely audible. "I'll do better, I promise." Rick straightened, clearly enjoying her desperation. "Promises don't clean floors," he said. "Move faster." She nodded and reached for the last piece. That was when she felt it, the weight of someone watching not with judgment but with concern. She glanced up. The man at the counter was standing now, closer than before. His posture was calm, controlled, but his eyes were stormy. Rick noticed him again and rolled his eyes. "Sir, I told you mind your business." The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Aaliyah. "You okay?" he asked quietly. The simplicity of the question nearly broke her. Aaliyah hesitated, then nodded quickly. "Yes, sir," Rick scoffed. "She's fine, just being dramatic." The man's gaze snapped to Rick. "Is she?" he asked. Rick bristled. "Excuse me?" "I asked if she's fine," the man repeated, his voice steady but firm. Rick stepped closer, puffing out his chest. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my diner, my staff. If you've got a problem, take it somewhere else." Aaliyah's heart pounded. Please don't, she thought. Please don't make this worse. The man looked around the room at the silent faces, the lowered eyes. "Is this how you talk to your employees?" he asked. Rick laughed sharply. "This one," he gestured toward Aaliyah. "She should be thanking me. I gave her a job when nobody else would." Aaliyah flinched. Man's jaw tightened. "You don't know her," he said. Rick shrugged. "I know enough." He turned back to Aaliyah. "Get up, and when you're done cleaning, I want you in the back. We're having a talk." Her stomach dropped. "Yes, sir," she whispered. The man took a step forward. "That won't be necessary." Rick spun around. "What did you just say?" "I said," the man repeated louder now, "that won't be necessary." The diner went completely silent. Rick stared at him, incredulous. "You don't give orders here." "No," the man said calmly, "but I can ask questions." Rick laughed, shaking his head. "This is unbelievable. You come in here, order toast, and suddenly you're an expert on running a business." The man didn't rise to the bait. "How long has she worked here?" he asked. Rick sneered. "Long enough to know better." "That wasn't my question." Rick's face reddened. "I don't have to answer you." "No," the man agreed. "You don't." He paused. "But you might want to." Aaliyah looked between them, confusion and fear twisting in her chest. Rick crossed his arms again. "Or what?" The man met his gaze. "Or I start asking them somewhere else." A murmur rippled through the diner. Rick scoffed. "You threatening me?" The man shook his head. "I'm offering you a chance to stop." Rick laughed loudly. "Stop what? Doing my job?" "Yes," the man said. "Abusing your power." Rick's smile vanished. "Get out," he said coldly. "Finish your food and leave. You're done here." The man glanced at his untouched toast, then back at Aaliyah. "You don't deserve this," he said gently, her eyes filled with tears again. Rick slammed his hand on the counter. "I said get out." The man turned slowly. "I will," he said. Rick smirked. "Good." The man took a step toward the door, then stopped. He turned back. "But not before I say this." Rick rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go." The man's voice carried across the diner. "Every person in this room is watching how you treat someone who can't fight back." Rick shrugged. "That's life." "No," the man said quietly. "That's choice." Rick opened his mouth to respond, and that's when Aaliyah spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the tension like glass. "Please," she said. "Just go. I don't want trouble." The man looked at her, pain flickering across his face. He nodded slowly. "For now," he said. He turned and walked toward the door. Rick smirked in victory. But he didn't see the look the man gave him as he reached for the handle. A look that promised this wasn't over. The diner air felt heavier than ever, thick with tension and shame. Aaliyah crouched beside the broken toast, her fingers trembling, tiny shards cutting her skin, but she didn't notice. She barely noticed anything except the burning humiliation and the gnawing fear of losing her only source of income. Rick stood over her, smirking as he straightened his tie. "See, this is why I can't run a business without someone constantly babysitting these people. You mess up once, and suddenly it's the end of the world." Aaliyah's hands shook as she placed the final piece of ceramic into the trash. Her knees were sore, her arms ached, and yet worse than all of it was the feeling of being invisible to everyone else in the diner. The man who had tried to intervene moments earlier had left, or at least, it seemed that way. The door jingled as it closed behind him. Aaliyah exhaled, her shoulders sagging. "Good," Rick said, as if reading her thoughts. "Now go wash your hands. I want this place spotless before the lunch crowd comes in. And remember, one more mistake and you're out." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, and walked toward the small sink at the back. The cold water splashed on her hands, but it didn't wash away the shame. And then suddenly a calm yet commanding voice echoed through the diner. "Rick." Rick froze mid-motion, the rag in his hand stopping abruptly. He turned toward the voice, and Aaliyah followed, wiping her hands on her apron, curiosity mingling with fear. A woman had entered the diner. She moved slowly, deliberately, her presence filling the room without effort. Every eye turned. She was impeccably dressed, her hair perfectly styled, and her eyes held a mix of gentleness and authority that made Rick's smirk falter. "Ma'am," Rick stammered, "can I help you?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She walked past him with an ease that suggested she owned every step she took. She reached the counter, her gaze softening as it fell on Aaliyah. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked. Her voice was warm, comforting, and powerful all at once. Aaliyah nodded quickly, unable to speak. Rick's jaw tightened. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. "This is a private matter. You shouldn't be." The woman raised a hand, cutting him off with a simple gesture. "I think you should sit down, Rick." The color drained from his face. He laughed nervously, trying to maintain his composure. "Ma'am, I'm the manager here. She held up a hand again, this time more firmly. "I am well aware of that. Now please sit." For a moment, Rick didn't move. He looked around at the other diners, who now watched in silent anticipation. Something about her presence made it impossible to challenge her. Something about the calm certainty in her eyes made him feel small. Finally, he sat, muttering under his breath, but unable to regain the control he had moments ago. The woman turned her attention to Aaliyah. "I'm glad you're okay," she said gently. "I understand you've been treated unfairly." Aaliyah's lips trembled. I didn't want to cause trouble, ma'am." "Sometimes," the woman said, her eyes softening further, "not causing trouble is what gets you hurt the most." She looked at Rick, her expression hardening slightly. "Now tell me everything that happened here." Rick opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around the room, suddenly aware that every customer was watching. His smirk was gone. Aaliyah spoke, her voice quivering but firm. "I dropped a plate, ma'am. I tried to clean it, and she swallowed. He yelled at me in front of everyone. He said things about me, about my worth." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained calm. "Rick, is that true?" Rick shifted in his seat. I was just trying to." "You were humiliating her," she said softly, almost a whisper, but with such authority it made everyone in the diner lean forward instinctively. "And you didn't even notice the harm you were causing." Rick's face turned red. It wasn't personal." The woman's gaze hardened. "Everything is personal when it involves human dignity. Everything is personal when you abuse your position." Aaliyah swallowed hard, unsure if she could believe what she was hearing. She had never seen anyone speak to Rick like that. No manager, no customer, no one, not even herself. The woman reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, sleek card. She placed it on the counter with a deliberate flourish. "This," she said, voice ringing with authority, "is the card of the person who owns not just this diner but the entire chain across the state." The room fell silent. Rick's eyes widened, mouth opening and closing as if he were trying to form words, but none came out. "I am the CEO of Harper's Diner," she said simply, letting the words hang in the air. "And you, Rick, have just humiliated an employee in front of my customers." Rick's face turned pale. He swallowed, shaking. I didn't know. You should have known better," she said sharply. "Do you understand what that means?" You're fired," she interrupted. "Effective immediately. Collect your things and leave. And if you think about contacting me again in any professional capacity, remember this: dignity is not optional." Aaliyah blinked, her mouth slightly open. She couldn't believe it. The same man who had tormented her, who had threatened her livelihood, was gone without her even needing to plead. The woman turned to her then, smiling warmly. "And you, Aaliyah, should know something else. You do not deserve to be treated like this, not ever." "I thank you," Aaliyah whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. The woman's eyes softened even more. "It's not just about today. You are capable of so much more, and I intend to make sure you have the chance to show it." Aaliyah shook her head, still in disbelief. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the woman said. "Just let me handle the rest. For now, go wash up. There's a lot to discuss about your future." Aaliyah stood slowly, still shaking, her hands trembling as she reached for the sink. But for the first time that day, she felt something warm and strong inside her chest. Relief, safety, hope. As she cleaned herself up, the woman looked out over the diner once more. Her presence had shifted the entire atmosphere. The whispers among the customers were no longer sympathetic, they were awed. People were staring not just because of Rick's humiliation, but because the woman's quiet power radiated authority and kindness simultaneously. Finally, Aaliyah returned to the counter, standing taller than she had all morning. The woman smiled. "Aaliyah, I need to know everything, about your family, your life, everything. We have work to do, and I am going to make sure no one ever treats you like that again." Aaliyah's lips trembled, and finally a tear rolled down her cheek. I don't know how to thank you." The woman knelt slightly to meet her eye level. "You don't need to. You never needed to. Your courage, your dignity, your kindness, that's what matters. I've just made sure the world finally noticed." And in that moment, Aaliyah understood. The stranger who had entered her life that morning, the woman whose presence had silenced a bully, whose calm authority had transformed fear into safety, was more than a savior. She was the person who would change everything. Rick didn't linger. He had been escorted to the back office to gather his things, his face a mixture of anger, disbelief, and shame. Every step he took toward the door felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the humiliation he'd inflicted on Aaliyah was now pressing down on him. The customers who had witnessed the scene whispered quietly among themselves, and some even offered nods of sympathy toward her. Aaliyah remained at the counter, still trembling, her heart pounding in a mix of relief and disbelief. The woman, the CEO, stood behind the counter, observing quietly, letting the moment settle in. "Are you okay?" The CEO asked, her voice calm but filled with concern. Aaliyah nodded, though her lips trembled. I think so. I can't believe he's gone." "He won't be back," the woman said firmly. "Not here, not anywhere near you, and not anywhere that matters to your career or future." Aaliyah's throat tightened. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd have done." "You didn't have to do anything," the woman said. "You did your job, you did it well, and you carried yourself with dignity, even when he tried to crush it. That's more than most people can do." The CEO leaned forward, placing a hand gently on Aaliyah's shoulder. "But this isn't just about today. I want to help you, and I want to make sure that what happened here never happens again." Aaliyah blinked, unsure what to say. You would really help me." "Yes," the CEO said, smiling. "I've seen too many people like you, bright, hardworking, full of potential, trapped in situations where nobody notices or cares. That ends now." Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. She had always dreamed of a better life, but hope felt distant, fragile, and impossible. And yet, standing here with someone of such power and kindness offering help, it felt real, like a hand reaching through the darkness. Rick had barely made it to the door before the CEO called after him. "Rick, wait!" He stopped, looking over his shoulder with a mix of arrogance and fear. "You're going to face more than just being fired," she said calmly. "This was not just misconduct, it was harassment, and I've already reported this to the corporate office. HR will follow up. There will be legal consequences, understand?" Rick's face paled. You can't." "I already did," she interrupted. "Consider this a lesson, and remember, people who abuse power always get caught, some just sooner than others." He swallowed hard, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came. Finally, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The sound echoed through the diner and a hush settled over the room. Aaliyah finally allowed herself to exhale. The CEO turned to her. "Now," she said, "let's talk about you." Aaliyah looked at her, hesitant. I don't want to cause trouble. I don't even know where to start." "Start here," the CEO said, gesturing toward herself. "I want to know everything about you, your family, and your life. Every struggle, every dream, every obstacle. Nothing is too small or too embarrassing." Aaliyah hesitated, then spoke, her words trembling at first but gaining strength as she continued. She told her about her mother's illness, the bills piling up, the sleepless nights, the fear of eviction, the little joys she clung to like her morning ritual of making coffee for her mom, or the quiet moments she spent reading old books she borrowed from the library. The CEO listened patiently, nodding and occasionally asking gentle questions. "And your goals?" she asked finally. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. "I I just want to make life better for my mom, for us. I want to go to school again someday, maybe work in a place where people actually care about me, where I can use my mind and not just scrub floors." The CEO smiled warmly. "And you will, I promise you, you will." The first step was immediate. The CEO wrote a check that covered the rent, the overdue medical bills, and the prescription that Lena needed. Aaliyah's hands shook as she accepted it. I can't take this," she whispered. "You can and you will," the CEO said firmly. "This isn't charity. It's an investment in someone who deserves the opportunity to rise above circumstances that aren't her fault." And it didn't stop there. The CEO arranged for Aaliyah to receive private tutoring so she could complete her education. She connected her with a mentor in the city who could guide her toward career opportunities. Most importantly, she made it clear that she would personally ensure Aaliyah never faced harassment or unfair treatment in any workplace again. Over the next few weeks, life began to change. Aaliyah's mother received her medication, and for the first time in months, her cough began to ease. The apartment was no longer dark and oppressive. Small comforts were added, new bedding, fresh groceries, a warm stove to cook meals. One evening, as they sat together eating a simple dinner, Lena reached across the table and held her daughter's hand. "You've changed everything," Lena said softly, tears in her eyes. Aaliyah shook her head. "No, Mom, someone gave us a chance, but we did this. We survived it." Her mother smiled, squeezing her hand. "No matter what happens, don't ever let anyone make you feel small again." Aaliyah also began her work under the CEO's guidance. She learned customer service from the top down, studied business operations, and quickly became indispensable, not just at the diner, but in the CEO's larger chain of restaurants. She discovered talents she never realized she had: leadership, strategy, and an uncanny ability to see problems and solve them creatively. But even more importantly, she learned something about herself: that dignity, courage, and perseverance are more powerful than fear, humiliation, or poverty. One afternoon, she and the CEO sat in the office overlooking the city. "You've come a long way," the CEO said. "I couldn't have done it without you," Aaliyah said quietly. "You already had it in you," the CEO replied. "I just gave you the chance to see it in yourself." Aaliyah smiled, her heart full. "I'll never forget this. I'll never forget what you've done for me, for my mom." "You don't have to," the CEO said. "Just promise me you'll do the same for someone else when you have the chance." "That's how we break the cycle." Aaliyah nodded. She knew she would. By the end of this chapter in her life, Rick had become nothing more than a cautionary tale. His name was whispered among the staff as someone who had lost everything because of cruelty and arrogance. The diner thrived in an atmosphere of respect, kindness, and fairness, a stark contrast to the terror he had tried to impose. Aaliyah, once a frightened young woman kneeling in broken glass, now walked confidently among customers and staff. She carried herself with dignity, knowing she had survived the worst and emerged stronger. And the CEO? She remained a guiding force, quietly ensuring that Aaliyah's future would be secure, financially, educationally, and emotionally. In the quiet moments, Aaliyah would sometimes think back to that morning, to the plate crashing on the floor, to Rick's sneer, and to the whisper she had feared would make everything worse. And she would smile because that whisper, her honesty, her vulnerability, her courage, had changed everything. 5 years had passed since that fateful morning at Harper's Diner. The city skyline glowed in the late afternoon sun, painting golden streaks across the tall glass buildings. Aaliyah Thompson walked briskly through the busy streets, but she no longer carried the weight of fear, desperation, or self-doubt. Gone were the frayed shoes, the worn apron, and the trembling hands. In their place were polished heels, a crisp professional suit, and a posture radiating confidence. Her head was held high, not with arrogance, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had survived life's cruelest tests and emerged stronger. Aaliyah reached the headquarters of Thompson Enterprises, the company she now managed as part of the executive team. The CEO, the woman who had once rescued her, smiled warmly as she greeted Aaliyah at the entrance. "You're early," the CEO remarked, her eyes twinkling. "I like that." "I like to start the day ready," Aaliyah replied with a smile, "especially knowing how far we've come." The CEO nodded, her gaze lingering on Aaliyah with pride. "Do you remember that day at the diner?" she asked softly. Aaliyah chuckled. "How could I forget? I nearly had a panic attack over toast and a broken plate." The CEO laughed lightly, shaking her head. "And yet that moment was the beginning of everything. The world often tests us with small things first to see if we have the strength for the larger battles ahead." Aaliyah paused, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and awe. "I never imagined life could be this different, not just better, but meaningful." "You earned it," the CEO said firmly. "I simply gave you the opportunity. You gave yourself the courage." Later that day, Aaliyah visited her mother, Lena, who now lived comfortably in a bright, sunlit apartment just a few blocks from Thompson Enterprises. The once dark apartment that had smelled of illness and fear was replaced with warmth, laughter, and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Lena sat at the kitchen table, knitting a scarf, her face glowing with health and peace. "Mom," Aaliyah called, walking into the kitchen. "Aaliyah," Lena said, her eyes lighting up. She dropped her knitting and embraced her daughter tightly. "Look at you, you're glowing, you've grown into a woman I can only dream about." Aaliyah laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We've both grown, Mom, you too. Look at you, healthy, happy, no more worries about medicine or bills." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for us, Aaliyah. You've given me hope again." "You gave me hope first, Mom," Aaliyah said, her voice trembling. "You taught me to never give up, even when everything seems impossible." They sat together for a long while, talking about the past, but also about the future. Aaliyah shared her plans to expand her work in the company, to mentor other young women like herself, and to create opportunities for people who, like her, had once been overlooked and underestimated. Aaliyah also reconnected with her former coworkers at Harper's Diner. Many had stayed, but the atmosphere had changed entirely. Respect, kindness, and equality had replaced fear and intimidation. The diner had become a training ground for young employees, teaching them not just to serve food, but to serve with dignity. Aaliyah often returned, now as a mentor and executive, helping employees with scholarships, education, and guidance. She shared her story openly, inspiring countless young women who faced similar struggles. One afternoon, a young black woman approached Aaliyah nervously, holding a tray with trembling hands. "I I dropped a plate," the young woman admitted quietly. Aaliyah smiled gently, kneeling to meet her eye level. "It's okay, accidents happen. The important thing is how you handle it, not the mistake itself." The girl's eyes widened, relief washing over her face. "But the manager, he yelled at me. He said I was worthless." Aaliyah's gaze softened but remained firm. "Listen to me. No one has the right to make you feel small, not him, not anyone. You are capable. You are worthy. And if anyone ever tries to make you forget that, you come to me. Understand?" The girl nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I understand. Thank you." "You're welcome," Aaliyah said, helping the girl steady the tray. "Now let's get this cleaned up together." And together they did. In the evenings, Aaliyah often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the broken plate, the sneering manager, and the quiet whisper that had caught the attention of someone who would change her life forever. She thought of the CEO, whose kindness had not just rescued her, but had given her the tools to build a future. She realized that life had a way of testing people, not to break them, but to reveal the strength within. And sometimes, all it took was one person who believed in you, even when the world doubted. Years later, Aaliyah sat in her own office, overlooking the city. Photographs of her mother smiling, her team at the diner, and her own graduation lined the walls. She had earned multiple degrees, started charitable initiatives, and was respected in her community as a voice for fairness, equality, and opportunity. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. A young intern stepped inside nervously. "Ms. Thompson, I just wanted to say your story, it inspired me." Aaliyah smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Thank you, and remember, inspiration is not enough. Courage is what changes lives. You have it, and now it's your turn to use it." The young intern nodded, a glimmer of hope lighting her face. Aaliyah watched her leave and then gazed out the window at the sprawling city below. She thought about the morning when she had been humiliated over a broken plate, alone and afraid, and how far she had come. It was more than success, it was transformation. More than opportunity, it was justice. And more than kindness, it was the proof that human dignity, courage, and compassion could triumph over cruelty. The moral of the story: a single act of kindness can change the course of a person's life. Courage in the face of humiliation can reveal strength even in the most desperate circumstances. Human dignity is priceless, and respecting it transforms not just individuals but entire communities. And so, Aaliyah Thompson's life became a testament to the truth that hope, perseverance, and compassion are forces more powerful than any obstacle, and that a single whisper of vulnerability can awaken a lifetime of opportunity.